Welcome back to Daily Bible with Chris. This is our part 2 from our previous daily Bible reading where we were in the book of Proverbs. We read Proverbs 6 through chapter 10. So as I always say on these part 2s, I know you get probably tired of it. If you've not already watched that video or you haven't read these 5 Proverbs 6 through 10, I would encourage you to do it first, then come back here for this kind of commentary or a little bit of a general Bible study that we pull out of the chapters that we've read. Certainly, this is not an exhaustive, deep dive, verse-by-verse extrapolation, but just pulling out some general principles that we can apply and meditate upon our reading. So again, if you've not already done that, I encourage you to do that first, then come back to this. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, would you consider hitting that subscribe button for me? And drop a comment in the video. It lets me know that you are watching. Maybe let me know where you're watching these from. And if you wouldn't mind, hit that like button. All of those things help a very small, tiny channel like this to reach more people, because we want more people reading the Bible together, or at the very least, listening to the Bible together. And so I'm so appreciative of each of you that do watch these and listen to these on a daily basis. And so let's dive right into Proverbs chapter 6. And what we have here, we've got Proverbs 6 through 9 is kind of the conclusion of the father speaking to the son, and the kind of the conclusion of Lady Wisdom versus the foolish woman versus the wayward adulterous woman comparison. And then once we get to Proverbs chapter 10, from Proverbs chapter 10 to about, I think, Proverbs 22, we have what are typically known as these kind of two-line proverbs, collection of proverbs that happen. And you'll see when we get there, it changes, the narrative changes. And then at Proverbs 22, at that point, I think it's 22:6, and so then it kind of changes again, and we go back into a little bit more long form description of Proverbs until we get to the end of the book. But we got a little ways to go before we get there. So diving into Proverbs 6, Proverbs 6 handles several different weighty problems and issues. And again, this is the father speaking to his son. This is Solomon speaking to his son. And first of all, he's warning him against financial obligations. Specifically, the idea of what they call putting up security for your neighbor. Now, this is not exactly in their day and age what we might think of as co-signing a loan for someone, or something to that effect, where we go in and we co-sign so someone can take out a loan that they couldn't do on their own or something. I mean, it is similar, but it's not exactly the same. From what I've read of this, it's the idea that you're signing a document that allows this person to open up a line of credit. Okay, so it is similar to a loan, but a little bit different in that you're putting your name on that, as you're obligated if this person is unable to pay back what they have drawn out, and who knows what the exacting, how much and all that kind of thing. So So again, it's similar to co-signing, but it's a little bit different. And obviously back then, when you failed to pay back what you owed, there was things like indentured servitude, slavery, all prison, all kinds of things could happen to you for you to have to pay back, or to at least pay the price for defaulting on your agreement. And so Solomon is warning his son not to do this. It's not a wise thing to do. And really, in most cases, it's not a wise thing to do to co-sign for someone or what have you. Obviously, parents sometimes will do that for children, or take out things to help them go to school, or help them when they're first starting out, or get a car, or buy a house. But Solomon's warning that it's something you should need to be really careful about. And especially, the idea here is not necessarily a family member, although I think you should need to be cautious there too. He's warning against a neighbor, or as he also mentions, a stranger. In other words, someone not in your family. It may be someone that lives near you, someone that you know, but there's no, family bond to it. He's warning against it. Sometimes we do that to try to help somebody out, but we may then if they're foolish and not wise with how they manage their resources, then we may get forced to pay the price for their lack of diligence. And that's kind of the idea. So he says, my son, if you've done this, okay, so he's warning kind of the idea that if you've already done this, but the caution is don't do it in the first place. But if you have done this, you got to be careful, because sometimes you can be taken in by somebody. I mean, there's plenty of con men, con women out there that'll con you and tell you all that you want to hear, and then you're like, oh yeah, I'm just helping you out, and then you get burned. They leave town, you're stuck owing the money. Those kinds of things happen even to this day. So you always need to be cautious about what you obviously putting your name to your own debts, much less anyone else's debts. And so So he says, if you're in a situation, you've spoken up, you've signed for somebody's, and you've made an agreement with them to allow them to take out debt or take out credit and such, go to them, humble yourself before them, and if at all possible, ask them to relieve you of your obligation. In other words, get out from under what you have agreed to. Plead with them. Don't, just do what you can. Obviously, there's a case where you may not be able to get out of it, but if you're able to, if the person was in good nature, he says, go do whatever you can. Don't let him sleep. In other words, don't sleep. Go immediately. Don't wait around, because every moment could cost you more down the road. And so he's like, escape from it if at all possible. He's not saying don't do what you're obligated to, but he is saying go talk to the person, and if possible, get out from under your obligation. And then if you're able to, then you have freedom. And you're going to see in the book of Proverbs, there's these cautions about debt. That the lender, the person who takes debt is slave to the lender. We're going to read that later on. And certainly, taking on unnecessary debt is not a great situation. Sometimes it happens. Obviously, there are things like homes and cars and things that are kind of, there's no going. Most people can't lay out a couple $100,000 in cash for a home. Most people can't. So they do have to, or for a car or whatever. But just running up credit card bill, and I know with this economy, and trust me, I can understand. It's I understand. There's things where we do sometimes we do go into debt because there's no other choice sometimes. But he's going to caution against it. If it's necessary, work and work and work and try to stay out of debt as much as possible, and get out of debt as quickly as you're able to if you are in it. And then that's true freedom is kind of the idea here. And so then he contrasts that idea with laziness. And we have the famous picture. Solomon's going to refer to the ant. Obviously, we see the ant who's just busy. You see the ants. You never see ants just sitting up, kicking up their heels, resting. They're just working. They're going out, bringing in things back into their homes, back into their mounds, whatever it might be. They're working, especially when during the time when they can go out and get grass or whatever it might be, bread, little crumbs, whatever it is, you see them bringing it back. And he says, go to the ant, you slacker. In other words, look at the ant and see how diligent he is, right? He prepares in the summer so that he has things to help him so that there's things during the harvest, so that when the lean time comes or when the winter comes and he can't go out and forage, there is food for him. And so he says, how long are you going to lay in bed? Again, there's nothing wrong with sleep and rest. We all have to have sleep and rest. But we're talking about the person who just lays in bed all the time and doesn't want to get up and go to work and do anything. He said, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands, and then poverty will come upon you, right? And so, we have to work to make a living. That's part of course, it's not, some of the people try to say that work is part of the curse. There was work before sin, right? It's just that work is hard, and there's the sweat of the brow, and things are not always as easy as it was before the fall for Adam and for Eve. But there was certainly work even before that. And we are supposed to work, and we are, whether it's around our house, whether it's at a job, at a business, whatever it might be, we are to work to take care of ourselves and to provide for ourselves. Otherwise, poverty will come upon us. We can't wait for somebody else to take care of us. We need to take care. Obviously, there's times when, of need and such, we help people. We try to be generous to people. Sometimes we're the recipients of it, but we should also be the ones giving when we're able to do that as well. So there's those kinds of things. But the idea, the general rule should be, for those who are able to, you should work. The Bible's clear. If you don't work, you shouldn't eat, right? And so, so we need to be active about that. And then we see, contrast that. The next is talking about the malicious person, the person who's working against you. It talks about the person who's a wicked person. They go around speaking dishonestly. They wink their eyes. They do all these different things. They're plotting against you. They're there to stir up trouble. Therefore, that person, because they're not walking in integrity, they're doing these things for their own benefit. Calamity will eventually strike them down. And then in verse 16, we have this list here of the things that God hates. 6 things that he hates, and then a 7th is an abomination to him. It's kind of the culmination of the previous 6. And what are the 6 things that he hates? Well, he hates arrogant eyes. We've talked about it many times, that God resists the proud, right? Arrogance, pride, because really as human beings, we have nothing to be arrogant and proud about, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that you can't take pride, let's say, in doing a good job, or, be proud of your children. But the idea of pride, self-sufficiency, I did this all on my own. I pulled myself up by my own bootstraps. Certainly we should work and be diligent, but just remember that everything we have comes from above. And so that should cause us to have humility, not arrogance, right? A lying tongue. We're not to lie, okay? That should not be a regular practice. Hands that shed innocent blood, people that go out and kill or murder. Any shedding of innocent blood, God despises that. He hates that. A heart that plots wicked schemes. There's these people that are always plotting to do things and evil things and such. Those with that feet eager to run to evil. Those who are just eager to do whatever's wrong all the time. A lying witness who gives false testimony. Notice this is a contrast. This is just about a lying tongue. But this is a person who tells in like a legal proceeding, they're bearing false witness against somebody. Of course, we know that's one of the 10 commandments. They're swearing out something. And we have in this day and age, people lying about other people all the time, swearing out things, saying things happen when they didn't happen, right? To try to get something or try to punish someone. God hates that kind of thing. If you're ever called in a legal matter, tell the truth. Tell the truth, regardless of the consequences. Tell the truth. Don't lie. And the thing that is detestable, mostly an abomination, the one who stirs up trouble among brothers. The one that's there as a cause of just friction all the time. Remember we read before in the book of Psalms how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell together in unity. But how horrible it is when you have somebody, let's say in a family, and their whole purpose is just to cause chaos and disunity and pit this person against that person. Or in a church, same thing can happen. You have these people that are working against the leadership of the church, or they pit this group of people against that group, and there's just all this. There's no place for that. There's no place for that. No place for that in a job setting, whatever. Don't be a person that's about dividing up things. Certainly there are times when you have to stand up for issues and such. But you shouldn't be working to try to pit people against each other. God thinks that's an abomination. And then we conclude the chapter with a warning against adultery, specifically adultery here. And he's talking to his son. He said, don't reject your father's command. Don't reject what you've heard from your father and mother. Keep them. Again, we have this idea, bind them to your heart. Tie them around your neck like a piece of jewelry. Have it right here where you can see it all the time. Have it close to you. And wherever you go, where you're walking or lying down or wherever you're at, or when you wake up, when you go to bed, all these things, it should be there for you because the command is a lamp, right? God's word is a lamp unto my feet and a light to my path. We want to know which way we should go. We need the illumination of God's word to do that. And this will protect you. Doesn't necessarily mean you won't, but it gives you, doesn't necessarily mean it'll 100% keep you from it. But if you're meditating on God's word, we're reading God's word, we're less apt to fall into temptation, right? Because God's word is on our mind and such. But when we don't do that, or we ignore those things and we're just walking in the flesh, then guess what? We're setting ourselves up for a fall. And so we got this description, the evil woman. Again, doesn't mean there can't be an evil man to a woman, right? You can look at it both ways, but he's writing it as the son who's more, let's just say guys are more likely, especially young, foolish men, are more likely to fall for this than the other way around. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen the other way around. Certainly there are men that prey on young women and take advantage and lure them into things. Certainly that happens. But so we've got this idea, that flattering tongue of the wayward woman, the sweet talking and such. And this day and age, and back then, this would be actual words because they would have had to met. Today, it could be online. It could be, messaging with each other or texting with, or Snapchatting different things, lewd images and pictures and dialogue. And certainly there's plenty of things online and in the media today that just can capture a young man's heart mind. Don't lust for her beauty, right? Beauty there's nothing wrong with beauty, right? God created that in women. God created that in nature. There's nothing wrong, but we're not to lust, right? Because when we lust in our heart, we've already, as Jesus said, have already committed adultery in our heart, whether we actually go through with the physical act or not. And said, don't let her captivate you with her eyelashes. The idea that eyes can oftentimes allure a young man or person. There's something about those eyes. And then we have this idea. It says, for a prostitute's fee is only a loaf of bread, but the wife of another man goes after a precious life. Now you might read that. So he's making the contrast to, if you've got the sexual urge and you're not you've got comparing, well, a prostitute's just going to cost you a loaf of bread. But if you go into a married woman to do that and have that activity, it could cost you your life. Now he's not saying it's okay to go to the prostitute, right? But he's saying that as much as that is damaging to you, going into a married woman, going into an adulterous relationship is far more dangerous and deadly to you. Both are sinful. Both are equal before the Lord as far as sin. But one can cost you more down the road than the other. And so he's cautioning against each, but it's easy to read that and think, oh, he's saying, go to the prostitute. Don't worry about the adulteress. No, that's not what he's saying. He's just saying the cost of them is even greater for the adultery. You shouldn't do either. but there's greater cost, and you need to weigh that in your mind. And can a man embrace fire in his clothes and not be burned, right? It's the idea. And so many men, and I say this as a man, so many men try to see how close to the edge they can get, right? But then they'll say, well, I didn't actually sleep with her, or I didn't actually do this act, but I talked about it. I dreamed about it. I fantasized about it. I communicated about it, but I didn't go through it, so that's okay. No. All of those things are leading you down the path to one day going through with those kinds of things. But all of those things are damaging and destructive, and we should avoid them at all costs. So the idea of fire, it's like a fire, a burning. That's why they refer to it as like a burning desire, right? It's like a fire. So it is with the one who sleeps with another man's wife, and vice versa, with a wife who sleeps with or a woman who sleeps with a woman's husband. I'll get it out in a minute, right? No one who touches her will go unpunished. People don't despise the thief if he steals, right? It's comparing that you're stealing. You're stealing that thing, that idea of sex. You're stealing that from that person that was for that woman's was to be to her husband, not for you. And vice versa, for that husband for his wife and not for you, right? You're stealing it. But as a thief steals something, maybe they steal something to survive. They steal a loaf of bread because they're hungry, right? Yes, there's punishment if they get caught for that. It's not okay, right? But they can pay back restitution on it. How do you pay back sleeping with someone else's husband or wife or breaking that marital vow? How do you pay that back? How do you ever pay restitution for that? Because there's always those issues there with that. And so he's comparing that. So he says the one who commits adultery lacks sense. They're going for the temporary fling of pleasure, but not paying out, thinking about the long-term things. Because if you're married and you go after another married person, then not only are you risking that marriage, you're risking your own marriage, right? And then that may lead to divorce, which may cost you financially. It may cost you not being able to see your children. I mean, there's all these things that can happen, and there could be disease. And then he talks about the jealous husband who finds out what you've done. They may take their vengeance on you. They may kill you, right? That's happened. We see it in the news often, where the jealous the husband, and in some ways I feel like he's got some right there, takes it out on the person who was sleeping with their wife, right? Or vice versa. We've seen those kinds of things. So you're playing with fire right there. And so the best to just avoid that, at all costs. Don't let yourself get lured down that way. Don't put yourself in a position for that to happen. And we're going to kind of see this pivot in chapter 7. Okay. Chapter 7. Again, we have this reminder at the beginning here to keep the commands, tie them on your fingers, right? Like, like a little reminder, do you remember, from It's a Wonderful Life, the uncle there, had the reminder knots he put on his fingers to remind him of something he was supposed to do, right? Didn't work too well for him, but there's this picture, tie it on your finger, write it on the tablet of your heart, like literally chisel it. So it's part of who you are. It's there as a reminder. Treat wisdom like your sister. Now remember, again, this is as a son or, a male. So he's saying, just as a brother would defend his sister and protect his sister, or a close relative, treat wisdom that way. Keep them that close to you. And if you do that, it'll keep you from the forbidden woman, the wayward woman, again, with her flattering talk. Oftentimes, man, just words that are said to someone, especially, let's say, a man who's in a situation where he's not receiving, let's say, those words at home for whatever reason, and he goes outside and starts seeking that acknowledgement, seeking that respect, that flattery and such that he's not necessarily getting in his marital relationship, and vice versa. Women oftentimes will seek the things that they're not getting. Does not make it right. You do not have the right to do that. You need to be working within your own marriage relationship and praying that God will help that person to change and to work in a way to better meet not only the physical, but the emotional needs of your spouse. And then we have this picture. Solomon is a great storyteller. So at the window of my house, I look through my lattice. So he's up kind of on the rooftop and he's looking down and he sees this inexperienced youth. So a young man, very young man, inexperienced, out in the world, and he's lacking sense. And what does he do? He sees him sneaking through the streets and strolling down the road to her house. This woman that obviously he's met before. There's some kind of connection there. He's sneaking there. The idea this is happening at night. He's not doing it in broad daylight where everybody can see him. Most adulterous rendezvous happen what? They go somewhere private. They go somewhere, or they sneak out, or they're late at night when someone's gone, right? They're hiding it, right? If it was okay, you wouldn't be wanting to hide it, right? but they're hiding it. And so then he says, I saw this man just kind of sneaking through the corners headed for her house. And then he said, I saw this woman come out of the house dressed like a prostitute. In other words, she's dressed, showing off what she's got, as a prostitute would do. They would show off their bodies and they would show off things to try to appeal the man, just as we see today. They do the same thing, right? You see prostitutes in places, they dress as skimpily as possible, advertising their bodies. And so we see this woman is advertising herself, and she's got an agenda. She's loud and she's defiant. She doesn't even care. Like, whereas he's kind of hidden about it, she's flaunting what she's doing. And so now in the street, in the square, she lurks at every corner. She grabs him and she kisses him. She brazenly, so she's not even hiding it. She's doing it out in public, right? And she's doing this thing, and then she makes a mockery. I've gone into the temple. I've made my fellowship offerings. I've made my vows. I've done what I was supposed to do as a good Jewish woman. Now let's go violate all of that, in essence. And she describes this thing. I've made up the bedroom for you. I've got the best linen from Egyptian, the Egyptian linen, right? Even today, people talk about Egyptian cotton, right? I've perfumed the bed, right? I mean, she's painting this beautiful picture, be careful how I say it, but any husband, right, that would come home and their wife is dressed up and she's fixed up the bedroom and she's got it smelling, she's got the candles burning, man, boom, that man's going to be all in, right? Okay. We got this idea here. This is what she should be doing for her husband. And we're going to find out she does have a husband, but she's not. She's doing it for her lover, her young, inexperienced lover. She's out for a fling with him, right? And she's like, come in here where I've fixed up everything. Everything's smelling good. Everything's feeling good. Let's just come together and let's drink deeply of lovemaking until the morning. Let's just spend the night together and enjoy fleshly lust with each other. Let's feast. I mean, it's pretty descriptive here. Why? How can she do this? My husband isn't home. He's gone on a journey. He took a large bag of silver with him, and he's going to be away for a while. I know he's going to be away for a while. And so let's just take advantage of this time. And so she seduces him, and he goes into her. Descriptive. He goes into her. They consummate this thing, but he goes to her impulsively like an ox going to the slaughter. Okay. Kind of dumb, eyes bulging out. They can't believe this woman's after me like this. And he's like, absolutely, and young men, foolish, dumb, hormones are firing off, right? They're not counting the cost. Yeah. Let's just do what we need to do. And so he doesn't even realize he's going to be destroyed. It's going to cost him his life. Well, maybe he's not the first one that she slept with outside of her husband. And so maybe there's a disease he'll contract. But I think the more likely idea here is the husband's going to find out, and the husband's going to kill him. It's going to cost him his life, because adultery was a capital offense back then. If you were caught in adultery, you would be put to death, both you and the woman, right? If you were caught in that way. And so he's going to go in, he's going to violate this thing that is a capital offense. And the idea is whether the husband kills him or the state, the nation itself, the religious leader, take him and her out and stone them to death, all for a one-night fling, right? It's dumb. It's stupid. And so he says, pay attention. Listen, don't be drawn into these things. It leads to death. And she's got countless victims. And it's not necessarily saying this particular woman, but other women like her. They've led them down to death, lead them down to hell itself. So avoid it with all possibility. Don't get on the road. Don't go out at night heading toward her house. Don't even come anywhere near it. Same for us. Don't. If you've got a predilection toward things visually online, don't let yourself go that way. Don't even be on there. Or if you know where the seedy part of town where the type of women that would do this kind of thing are at, don't drive by it. Don't go over there. Don't look it up. Don't go, because all of those steps can lead you to destruction. And then chapter 8, we have this beautiful picture of wisdom again, calling out, just as we saw earlier. She goes out to the courts and the streets and the main gates, and she's calling. So you got this idea. She's making her voice heard. She's calling out. Wisdom's calling out to people to come to her. Come to me. Come to me. All those, learn to be shrewd. Learn to be wise. You that are inexperienced, right? Experience. The old saying used to be, experience is the greatest teacher. Now, it was an old cigarette ad. And they were talking about the experience of smoking cigarettes. But the same thing, experience, we learn from experiences and such, but we can also learn from other people's experiences and learn not to make the mistakes they've made, right? So he's like, I'm speaking good things. My mouth tells the truth. Follow me, listen to me. All of these things you should perceive. My instruction is greater than silver and gold. The things of God, the things of wisdom and understanding are greater than any financial wealth or riches or anything like that. we should go after that. We should seek after that. And he's like, and wisdom, again, is personified here as I, wisdom, share a home with shrewdness and have knowledge and discretion. There's nothing necessarily wrong with being shrewd. You hear that reference of being a shrewd businessman. It just means being wise. We're not talking about stingy or miserly or anything. We're just saying you can be honest and integrity, but be shrewd, be smart about what you're doing. Don't make bad decisions. Because again, verse 13, we have again, I hate arrogant pride, evil conduct, perverse speech. And wisdom has understanding and strength. It is by me that kings reign and rulers enact law. You want to be a good king? Be a wise king, right? Don't be a foolish king. Solomon was a wise king. And then wisdom says, I love those who love me, and those who search for me will find me. You want wisdom and understanding? Then seek for it, ask for it, read about it in God's word, right? And we know that God loves those who seek after him. Her fruit is better than silver and gold. Walk in the ways of righteousness. And then we have this idea that wisdom, obviously, and its relation to the creation. Verse 22, the Lord acquired me at the beginning of his creation. In other words, the idea that wisdom was there at the beginning of the creation. Obviously, God's wisdom and such. We see that God is full of wisdom. Jesus Christ is full of wisdom and such. And when we follow his things, we are following after the very things, the wisdom that God created the world. And so it was God's wisdom itself that helped create everything that we see today, set everything in motion, created the heavens and the earth and the waters and all of these things. He placed all these things. He laid these commands. And so we got this idea. I was a skilled craftsman beside him. I was his delight every day. In other words, these things that he was doing, I was rejoicing in his inhabited word. So we see wisdom even all the way back at the creation in the beginning of Genesis. And so that's the wisdom we should be seeking after, the wisdom of God. We need to seek after those things. And he says, those who, obviously those who love me, I love them, but those who hate me love death. Those who resist wisdom are the ones that are going to make dumb decisions that are going to lead to either physical death or spiritual death or both. And then we have in chapter 9 a comparison between wisdom and foolishness. So we have wisdom here. She's built her house. We've got this idea she's built a house on 7 pillars. Don't really know the significance per se of the 7 pillars. 7 is the number in the Bible referred to as the number of perfection. But the idea she's got this great, beautiful, awesome place with these 7 pillars. And she prepares meat. She prepares wine. She makes a table. Wisdom is very hospitable, which was something that was common in that culture, right? You wanted to be that. She sent out her female servants. She calls out from the highest points of the city. So she got up on a high point where everybody could hear, and she invites them to her home. Come to the house of wisdom. Come and eat and drink with me and be wise, right? So come and eat my bread and drink the wine I have mixed. Leave inexperience behind and you will live. In other words, come and feast with me and grow wise. Right? So just as we desire, bread, obviously, which was sustenance, and this idea of mixed wine would have been something, whether it's something that had some spices added to it to make it the best tasting, or the idea of mixing it with water, which was something common. You'd mix water with wine and such so that people could drink the water when they've come in for refreshing, and the wine would be there something to kill any bacteria or what have you. Either of those ideas kind of work here, but she's providing this for them. And then we've got this contrast of the wise person, focus in on the wise person, but don't waste your time trying to correct somebody who's a scoffer, who's a rebuker, who will not listen to wisdom. Instruct the wise and they will be wiser. Teach the righteous and they will learn. A person who is wise is always seeking after more wisdom. A person who is truly righteous will want to be more righteous or to walk more in the way God has called him to. The foolish person is going to reject all of that because they do not have discipline. And then we have this repetition we've already read, verse 10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Notice it's just the beginning. Having reverence and awe for God is just the beginning steps. It's not the conclusion. Then it's walking in, meditating on, fellowshipping with the Lord and growing closer to him and his understanding. And if you do that, days will be added to your life. That doesn't mean if you're wise, you're going to live to be, 100 years of age or whatever, but it means the likelihood of you living a long life is better because you're going to make good decisions. You're not going to make foolish decisions that may end your life early. And so the idea, if you're wise, you're the only one that can benefit from your wisdom directly. Certainly you can share your wisdom with others and it's up to them whether they accept it or not. But if a person mocks wisdom, they bear the consequences of that too. Folly. So now we have the contrast between foolishness or folly. She's a rowdy, gullible person. She doesn't know anything. She invites people into her house. So we have the house of the wise lady wisdom, and then we have the house of the foolish woman. Which are you going to go to? She sits by the doorway. So just as Lady Wisdom was out in the courts and she's calling them in, making an invitation, guess what? foolishness is out there too, and is also appealing to people, to the inexperienced. And sadly, more people are going to go into the house of foolishness than the house of wisdom. And so she's calling out to the inexperienced, come in here. And then she's feasting as well. She's giving some bread, but she's only giving bread and water rather than the kind of the bread and wine that we're getting from Lady Wisdom. But stolen bread is sweet and bread eaten secretly is tasty. The idea that something that you got that you got through some wickedness. Some people have referenced this as an allusion to stealing, stealing the bread or stealing the body of a wife or husband of someone else, right? It may taste good in the moment, right? We're doing this thing secretly. That could be part of this description, or it could just be something where, you steal something, maybe you steal some food or you steal something and it feels good in the moment, but ultimately it will not satisfy, right? The only thing that really satisfies is the bread of life through Jesus Christ, through true wisdom. But he doesn't know. He thinks it's okay. He's done all these wicked things. He stole something or he got something through some wicked, evil scheme. He thinks it's okay, but he doesn't know it's leading him down the path to death. And then Proverbs chapter 10. This is where we get into more of the little two, and there's a lot of themes here. This video is running a little bit long already, but this is where we get into kind of the two line Proverbs, of course. So this is Solomon's Proverbs that we pick up here, and for a good portion of the next few days of readings will be in this kind of idea. But we have right at the beginning, a wise son brings joy to his father, but a foolish son, heartache to his mother, right? A son who makes good decisions is going to bring honor to a family. The ones who do foolish things that cost them foolishly is going to bring reproach upon them because it reflects back on the father and mother. And then we've got a warning against ill-gotten gains. Profiting something through ill-gotten gains is not good. It leads to death, but righteousness rescues from death. The Lord will not let the righteous go hungry. He takes care of his own. Idle hands make one poor, right? And so if you're not working, if you're not diligent hands, though, bring riches, right? Hard work. There's the idea. The son who gathers in the summer is prudent. The one who sleeps during the harvest is disgraceful, right? It doesn't do any good to plant things if you're not willing to work during the harvest to reap them. And we have this idea: the blessings are on the righteous, but the mouth of the wicked, they conceal violence. The name of the wicked will rot, whereas the righteous will be a blessing. A wise person will accept commands or accept correction, but a foolish lips or a foolish person doesn't want to listen to it. They're hard-headed. They don't want to listen. The one who lives with integrity lives securely. They don't have to worry. They're walking in integrity. But the one who does things that are wrong, they have to worry about it. They're worried that people are going to find out who they truly are, right? The things that are done in what we think in the secret place, if it's exposed, we're worried about that. But a person who doesn't do anything wrong in the secret, in those hidden places, doesn't have to worry about any controversy coming out. So better not to do that. And so again, the mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life. The mouth of the wicked is violence. Hatred stirs up conflicts, but love covers all offenses. Nothing like loving someone so much that you overlook or you forgive something that they have done. Of course, greater love have we ever seen displayed than what God does when he overlooks, when he forgives us of our sins, when we don't deserve it. We see wisdom is found for the one who's discerning, but a foolish person requires a rod against the back. The idea of someone like a slave or servant, or even a spanking of a child, the idea they require this physical corporal punishment to get them to understand, whereas a wise person doesn't require any of these things. And so again, the one who follows instruction leads to the path of life, but the one who rejects correction, he is going to his death. And so again, we have this idea between the wise mouth and the wicked mouth. The one who's lying, the one who does slandering is foolish. When there are many words, sin is unavoidable, but the one who controls his lips is prudent. That's why we need to watch the tongue, what's coming out of our mouth. Out of the overflow of the mouth, the heart speaks. And sometimes when we talk too much, we can say things we shouldn't do. We can slander somebody. We can tell a lie about somebody. We can gossip about somebody, make a false accusation, whatever it might be. The tongue of the righteous is silver, but the heart of the wicked is of little value. And again, shameful conduct is pleasure for a fool, but wisdom is for a person of understanding. Like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so the slacker is the one who sends him on an errand. In other words, it's worthless, just as irritating as smoke is in the eyes, or that vinegary taste or that bitter taste on the teeth, such as you send somebody who doesn't want to work on an errand to do something for you because you know they're not going to do it. They're not going to do well. Verse 27, the fear of the Lord prolongs life. The years of the wicked are cut short. The righteous will never be shaken. right? Because their foundation is in God. The mouth of the righteous produces wisdom. The lips of the righteous know what is appropriate, but those who are wicked only do what is perverse. So notice through that, this is a lot about the mouth and what we're saying and talking about. And oftentimes what people say is more, sometimes will tell us more than what they actually do sometimes. And so it's always, we need to watch what we're saying. The tongue is like a little fire, as the book of James talks about, and it's a rudder. It kind of directs us. So sometimes better to keep our mouth shut and not say anything than to say something and in impulse or say something that we will one day regret. And so a person who's wise will know when to hold their tongue. And when they do speak, they'll know the words to speak. They'll let our speech be seasoned with salt, right? It should be bring life, not death. Because Jesus himself, his words were the words of life. And so our words should be words of life as well if we're truly following Christ and imitating him. So that's it. That's where we're going to stop today. Next daily Bible reading will be in Proverbs chapter 11. So I hope that gives you some insight. Again, I'm just kind of pulling out what I can to give you some general ideas of the application, but certainly meditate on these Psalms. Keep saying Psalms. Meditate on these Proverbs. I guess because we were in Psalms for so long. Meditate on these Proverbs and let God work in your life. Okay? God bless you. We'll see you next time in Proverbs chapter 11.